Ryan Boehm here, doing a Belayed Rappel instructional video on how to build the Belayed Rappel setup. Essentially, if you take new climbers out or guiding, you might want to introduce your clients or your climbers into rappelling and give them the opportunity to do that. And essentially, in a top anchored situation, you can set up a Belayed Rappel so they can get that experience. There's several things you're going to need. Obviously, a climbing rope. If you want to do a or a double rope rappel, then you're going to need a second climbing rope in order to set up the rappel setup. And I will go through the setup of that after I've shown the initial single rope setup. In order to save time, I've already set up an anchor point using this big, huge 3-foot diameter tree here. Generally, you're going to want to follow the Leadster acronym, which means limited elongation, has good angle, good direction of pull, is solid, timely and efficient in making, and is also redundant. So generally we'd have 2 points which we were anchored to, and then an equalized master point. But for simplicity here, I'm just going to use one anchor point, and that way it'll save time as well. I've obviously pre-flaked this rope. The working end is out of the pile, and we're going to use the open space of the tarp here as the open area which I can build the climb off of. I've already determined a good spot to climb. Essentially, that's the first thing that you need to do. Once you're there and set up, everybody needs to be back away from the cliff edge until everything is set up, and then you can start bringing them forward once you have all the safety measures in place. The first thing we're going to do is tie a figure 8 and a bight at the very end of the working end of the rope. So this is going to become our anchored end for now. We're going to use a locking carabiner here. Go ahead and lock it. We're going to feed ourselves enough slack that we can make a safety leash on a clove hitch. Generally, you're going to have quite a few large locking carabiners in order to do this. Several cordlets in order to build your anchors. We're not going to be using these. I just have these for extra locking small carabiners, and obviously I have large locking carabiners. So we're going to take one of the large locking carabiners, clip that through our belay loop, and clip the clove hitch to it, cinch it down. That way I can go examine the cliff edge and watch the bottom of the rope hit in order to set up the rappel. So now I'm going to flake this rope out here. Generally it would be onto the tarp again, but in this situation I have the tarp down, so we're just going to This allows you to check for abrasions in your rope, knots, cuts, things like that, in order to check the safety, etc., etc. Alright, so now I'm going to take a bit more slack, what I think is going to make it to the bottom, and we're going to throw it off of our cliff edge. So, since there's extra on the ground, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up the slack and leave about 3 or 4 feet of the, leave 3 or 4 space between the bottom of the cliff and the bottom of the climbing rope in order to make it so that once you rappel down, you can essentially rappel off the end of the rope and don't need to take off your belay device, which could result in losing it. So I've already predetermined that I need to pull about 3 more feet out of here. Try to keep your rappel rope out of the way of the pile. It'll make it a lot easier. So once you're at a good spot, I'm good right there, 3 or 4 feet above the ground. I'm going to lay it outside of the pile here, and I'm going to slide my hand up the rope and leave slack, or slide enough, just slack so it doesn't move. And I'm going to take the master point, undo the locker, take off your figure 8 on a bite, and lay it off to the side. We're going to take the rappel rope through the locking carabiner and set up a munter hitch. This way it's already preloaded, ready to go. Remember to lock your carabiner. Now, we're going to take and make another bite and pass it behind the rappel rope. This is going to set up a mule hitch. We're going to take the brake hand side of the munter and put a twist in it so that the brake hand initially comes out, twists, and coils down to our bite. Keep this coil as close to the hitch as you can. Now, we're going to pass the bite in front of the brake hand and go behind and through the bite that we made and pull it tight. Okay. Pull a little bit more slack through here so I have a little extra. Take it to 3 strands, go around it, and tie an overhand stopper knot. And tighten that up. Now we can take the rappel side, pull it through the munter hitch to get the slack out of the knot and out of the hitch, so that way when you load the rappel line, you don't have any weight, any slip in the line. We're going to take the free end of the rope here, give ourselves about 8 feet of slack. Now we want to tie a figure 8 on a bite. Take another locking carabiner and clip it through your anchor point. Usually you'll have a top shelf. You can clip this guy up on the top shelf. So I'm going to simulate that, even though this is definitely not a top shelf setup. We're going to say that it is. So I'm going to clip to the top shelf, lock the carabiner, and keep your slack in between your rappel line and your free end. So now I can extend the master point using a figure 8 on a bite. I'm going to use another locking carabiner here. I can take the clove hitch off of the far end of the rope, because I don't need to be safe there. I'm going to make myself a safety leash off of the working end of the rope here. Make sure that you save yourself enough workspace. If you need to help your client do a Z-pull or anything like that, make sure there's enough room you can do that. Lock your belay loop, pull this clove hitch tight, get yourself into a good position, and flake your rope out again, right in front of you. This way it'll feed correctly when you're giving the assist as far as the belay is concerned. Go ahead and untie our figure 8 on the bite here, get the free end of the rope. Now we're going to do a munter hitch. Sorry, actually, I'm going to leave about 10 feet of slack in order to work with here. That way my clients can tie in, and we're going to set a munter hitch here. go ahead and lock your carabiner. This is my belay side, so I'll go ahead and take my belay device out. Make sure it's set up correctly. Lock the carabiner, double check your harness, double check your leg loops, double check all of your lockers. Alright, now you can have your climber tie in here, the figure 8, retraced figure 8. So they can tie in, and once they're tied in, you can set them on rappel. So what you want to do is make sure that this rope is on top. Since it's going to be slack, it'll just hang off to the side and it'll be out of their way. So you get them on rappel, you get them tied in, you can tighten up the slack in the munter hitch, have them approach the edge of the cliff. Ideally there will be a ledge that they can step onto, take the slack out of the system, and then lower off. You can also give them a directional lift. That way it helps take the slack out of the system and they don't just fall off the cliff. If there is the scenario where essentially you're lowering them down, you didn't check your rappel rope good enough, there's a knot, or their hair gets stuck, or they jam their hand and let go, you're in control here. That way they cannot drop themselves off the end of the rope. The other thing that's beneficial with this is if there's a scenario where there's a knot in the rope or something becomes caught and it needs to be dislodged, I can load this line up once they're over the cliff edge. See how good it's like. They're down the cliff a little bit. I can take this guy, holding the brake hand, make myself another mule hitch. Yeah, they're gonna load it up. Still holding the brake hand. Tie it off. Always tie your safety knot. Now, they're free. You're free to go help them. And they can also unload the rappel line and get off the system. The other thing that's nice is once they're done, you untie your stopper knot, and you grab your brake hand. You can release and lower them back down to the bottom, or they can continue rappelling. Once they're at the bottom, since they don't have to take their belay loop off, it should just pull right out of the bottom of the rope. We can put them, either belay them back up on the munter, or put them on a gree or assisted device and allow them to ascend the cliff. And as far as a single rope setup goes, that's how you do it. And as each client goes, you can bring them up, obviously give them the rope about right there so they can tie in, be away from the cliff, be safe, etc., etc. Don't unclip from your safety line until you're done climbing. And that's it. In a two rope situation, you'd essentially set up the slack here. If you need to lower them off of here, that's also why the munter mule is here. But you would set up two lines for rappel, run your munter mule with your slack, and then just tie a figure 8 onto a bite onto your second master, or your top shelf, or your master point again. So that way you have slack to lower them off of this line and load up your belay line. That's only if need be, though. If properly done, you should not have to have them undo any of the munter mules, etc., etc. That's it. Thank you.